All right, so continuing our conversation, we talked about lawful direction. So being obedient and loyal. Obedient is following those directions. Loyal is making sure that you keep everything confidential. You owe them your allegiance. Could you represent a property on for which you as a broker have an interest?
Common sense would say no, but I bet legally there's a way to do it.
Actually, you sort of right. So legally, as brokers, you could never represent a buyer as a buyer's agent on a property for which you have an interest.
Because you information about them.
Well, if you owe your obedience and loyalty, how can you be loyal to more than one person? Am I going to be more loyal to you than me?
Could you do for sale by owner
So great question. Could you do for sale by owner? Yes.
as a broker?
I could do for sale by owner as a broker. I just have to disclose that I am a broker. And if it's my house, I still can't represent a buyer. So you can be unrepresented and still buy my house. I just can't be your buyer's agent. And I can't serve as a dual agent. So you have to be really careful with representing a buyer on property that you own. So that's obedient and loyal. Questions on that? Okay. All right, let's talk about ethics. So one thing we will discuss with the ethics is more in regard to the Realtor Code of Ethics, and we will get into that. And that is a whole nother class that is literally a class on ethics, but is reserved for Realtor members. So most of what we're talking about in this class is just becoming a licensee. The Code of Ethics applies to Realtors. Now with that being said, it doesn't come with certain implied ethical practices that should not be done in the real estate communities. So you cannot represent someone when you have a competing interest in that property. You are held to a higher standard. As a licensee in North Carolina, you are held to a higher standard. They expect you to know more. They expect you to conduct yourself accordingly and not take advantage of the consumers. Who does the Real Estate Commission exist to protect? The consumers. And if they think you're taking advantage of your position and intelligence in the real estate world, they're not going to love it. So don't take advantage of people, especially if there's a conflict of interest. So there is never a right way to do the wrong thing. We've talked about this. Something as simple as inflating a recommended list price to get a seller to sign with you. Ethical and legal. Wrong. Do you think it happens all the time?
Yes. Because they always think their house is worth more than you do.
Yeah, and sometimes it's, now here's the difference, right? So I say your house is worth $100,000. We should list it at $100,000. That's my recommended list price as your broker. I want us to list your properties at $100,000. You say, you know what, Stephen? I like you, but I want to list it at $125,000. I think it's worth 100. You think it's worth 125. Can I list it at 125?
Sure. Yeah.
If you told me to do it, am I following obedient orders?
Yeah.
Is that lawful?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can do that. Should I have a conversation with you that I don't think 125 is a good idea?
Yeah.
Sure, because that's doing my job. Now, inversely, could I tell you it's worth 125,000 when everyone else tells you it's worth 100 just so you'll list with me?
No.
Not a good idea. Ethical violation, also illegal practice, because I'm taking advantage of you. I'm basically lying, misrepresenting the list price as more than what it actually is to get your business.
And it's going to steal probably sell for $100,000.
Price
Yeah, I was going to say, why would you do that if ultimately it wouldn't bring it anyway?
So yeah, a lot of people will do that, and then, especially in a market like this, it's a seller's market where it's hard to come by listings. People will resort to ulterior means of finding ways to get people to list with you, and a lot of times that is, yeah, we can do that, we can do that, yeah, 300,000, sure, let's go that way, and know that we'll just get you to reduce the price and sell it. That's not a good business practice, folks. Now, if your seller directs you, and this is more often the case, at least in my world, the seller says, hey, I want to list it at 130 when I say it's worth 120. Great. If that's what you want to do, even though I'm pretty good at my numbers, here's my CMA, I've shown you what I feel this is a good marketplace, we'll try it your way. As long as, one, you don't get mad at me when it doesn't sell, and two, we have a plan to get it back to where I think it should be, so we have a price reduction plan in place to get it to where it needs to be to sell. Because I can follow your lawful directive and list it above, so long as, by the way, that's to protect me, because I don't want to list a house that I can't sell. Right? So if you're not going to get realistic about price, we're probably just going to pass. I'm not going to help you out there. All right, so do your duty of disclosure, and this is the number one thing, and I've probably mentioned it in every class that we've had so far, as the biggest burden, benefit, job, lots of things associated with your position as a broker. Disclose, disclose, disclose. Not only knowing what to disclose, but knowing what you should discover and disclose, and any information that you should not disclose. So, disclosure is a full and prompt disclosure of all material facts, and material fact is the biggest circle underline that. Because here's where we get into a lot of question of what is a material fact. I get this question every day still. Hey Stephen, what about this? Hey Stephen, is that a material fact? Hey Stephen, what about this? And usually the question is, if you have to ask me, it is, right? If you have to ask, should I tell people? Probably. If it doesn't hurt anything, probably. And sometimes if it does hurt anything. Because there are times where a seller says, hey, I have a structural crack in the basement. Great, thanks for sharing. I now need to share with every potential buyer that we have a structural issue in the basement. If we have a structural issue that we know about, and I know about it, I as broker have to tell everybody. Now, do you think the seller's going to love me for that?
No.
No. Now, I don't get to do self-assessment and be like, oh, yeah, that thing's bad, you don't need to buy it. That's a whole pun. Don't do that. I have someone who has confirmed that we have a structural issue, tell me I have a structural issue. I have paperwork showing where's the structural issue. I had to tell everybody there's a structural issue, right? We'll talk more about those. Due diligence. Due diligence is discover and disclose. This is the process to do those things. During a buyer's due diligence, they will seek all material facts that are relevant to the buyer. And I say that because it's hard to say what is everything a material fact. Not everything, unless it's relevant to your buyer. If it's relevant to your buyer and it's something they want to know before they buy the house, it's a material fact. I told you my nuclear power story. That's not something I tell every buyer. Hey, we have a nuclear power plant in Southport, North Carolina, 3 hours away. You may want to know about it. Not everybody cares about that. This buyer did. Because they did, I found out, we told them. Right? That now became a material fact that I could disclose to them. So disclosure question. Nearby properties contaminated with PCBs, remember we talked about those. Are you required to disclose?
If you know.
So if you know about it. But it's a nearby property, it's not mine.
If you can think
It still can affect more than just that one property.
I love where your head is at, people. I love it. Because just because it's not on your boundary does not mean it's not going to affect your property. If it's something, if you were buying and you knew there was PCBs pouring out on the ground nearby, you might want to know that. Now it's a material fact.
That's from the transformer, right?
Yes, ma'am.
When it pours out, does it look like something?
Not necessarily. I usually leak slowly. But,
No, it's funny you asked that because I was going to ask that question earlier and we moved off, but I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't go back to it. But if there is how would you know?
you wouldn't. I mean, most of the time you're not going to know unless someone has told you or given you evidence. It's very rare that, again, we are not PCB specialists. We're like, oh, that's that stuff, that's bad.
I know a transformer when I see it.
Yeah, that's a
I have
transformer.
obligation to research it and make sure it's not leaking. Sounds like no.
No, not necessarily. You would have, if there is a transformer leaking, it would probably be worth, getting the appropriate person to investigate, but you're not going to be responsible for checking every transformer on the way there. Yes, sir?
kind of like the oil pipes behind the bush. Like some things, like we're not expected to be we expect to be competent, but like we're not specialists.
You
I
got it.
expect to get poked in
You
the
got
head
it.
with problems.
Yeah, and we're actually going to talk some more about that. So what if a nearby property has contaminated well? Nearby property, contaminated well.
Yes.
Yeah, if you know it.
Nah, they're probably not in the same aquifer that runs for
Can't
miles. Yeah. You have to be very careful with those. Again, if it's a potential that it could affect, again, this is groundwater. If there's something in your groundwater, yeah, might want to know about that. What happens when the other agent releases confidential information about motivations, etc.? So let's say I am the buyer's agent and you are the listing agent, and I'd say I bring my buyers by and you call and you say, hey Steven, you should really bring us an offer because I think they're getting a divorce, they're really motivated, they got to sell like really fast. Should I tell my buyer that?
No.
If you're the buyer.
If you're the buyer's agent, yeah.
Well, yeah, you could.
Sure.
See the difference?
You're supposed to give them
Any confidential information that's given to me from the other side, I have to give to my client. Now,
So
they
they
violated their duties by giving me confidential information, but once I am aware of confidential information,
You share.
I have to share it.
But if y'all were talking about that over lunch, then
Yeah.
then you could. Like,
If they share confidential information that I work for the buyer, any information, no matter how I obtained it, given to me, I have to share with my buyer. Now here, let me rephrase that back into, remember our designated agent conversation? This is why the broker in charge, if they are the one doing the designating, have to be sure you don't know anything. Because if you do know anything, you have to tell them. And that's on me as broker in charge if that doesn't go well.
So what happens, you're designated, let's say Steve is the listing agent, he happens to be in the cubicle next to me, and I just overhear it. He didn't intentionally share it with me, I just overheard it
Once
because
you
we
know it,
sit
you
next
know
to
it.
each other.
Well, you can't use that right there.
Once you know it, you know it.
Even if you
Really?
just heard
And
it.
now do I need to recuse
Also,
myself?
why, as broker in charge, we've got to be careful. Now, if it's a designated agent situation, ideally, my goal is to make sure you don't know anything. It's also my goal is to make sure things like that don't happen.
Yeah.
But secondly, if you if you become privy to information that maybe you shouldn't, you could come to me as your broker in charge, and I could reassign it. So, but yeah, the idea is that as you're truly their coaches, anything you know, you use it. Which is also why I have to be very careful with who I designate, and make sure that they don't have any opportunity to know anything about the others. And again, this is why the firm size makes a big difference, right? In a 100-agent firm, that's easy. You don't ever come into the office, you're here every day. Perfect, no problem. Or, this is our office, and we all sit in here and talk twice a week. What are the odds that I wouldn't know something about your transactions? Maybe we don't even want to practice designated agency, because we can't guarantee that confidentiality.
Do you have any obligation to report anything about the fact that the other agent shared confidential information with you they shouldn't have?
To
the commission or to
there's no
anybody?
legal obligation. There might be some ethical requirements there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Interesting.
The property has unpermitted upgrades. Ooh, that was a popular one right now. So unpermitted meaning we talked about the construction, right? You have to get those permits, and then we add something, and we walk in like, "Well, this is a beautiful sunroom. You mind if I see your permits?" And you're like, "Huh?
They don't have-
What do we do about this?"
Disclose it, and it can't be included in the heated square footage.
Exactly right. We disclose it. Hey, I actually had this question before I came to class today. Somebody was listing a house that has an apartment above the garage, 500 square foot apartment. The only way to get into the apartment is from an outside entrance to go upstairs and into the apartment. It was permitted in this case, but it was not attached, directly accessible from the rest of it. So I can report it. 500 square foot apartment above the garage, not included in the heated square footage. Remember, heated, finished, directly accessible. We'll talk more about this.
So let's say a house has a efficiency in the back, you can include the efficiency?
If it's
That's
not
right,
attached.
process.
Yeah, if it's not attached. His question was if it has an efficiency, like an apartment in the back, or I can report it. I can say, hey, this has a 500 square foot efficiency apartment in the back. What I can't do is report it in my square footage of the house, so the finished square footage of the house. Which we have a chapter, and we'll go over the book of the residential guidelines. But the residential guidelines, by the way, residential guidelines, if I'm measuring a residential house, I have certain rules that I have to follow as a broker. And one of them is it has to be directly accessible, meaning we cannot go outside to get to another space. We cannot go through an unfinished space to get to more finished space. And so we can report it as being there, we just can't include it in the original square footage. And the same thing with unpermitted upgrades. If it was not in, because we know it's not permitted, we can report it as being there, we just can't include it in our total square footage measurements.
I thought you said last week that the person that owns the house could go and get a permit.
They could, and once it has been permitted, now it
Then
is
you can-
permitted.
yeah.
It's not unpermitted. We can count permitted space, we can't count it while it's unpermitted. They could go apply and have the inspector come out and get it permitted. Once we have the permits in
Oh, I
place.
see what you're saying, like, what do you do when it's not,
Right,
but
yeah.
not,
Ideally, what
not
we do,
just-
we call them to get it permitted, so
Yeah.
that we can include it.
That's
But if
what I
they
was-
won't, then we just have to exclude it from our square
Okay.
footage. Or if they can't, yeah, because maybe they didn't build it to the right quality.
The buyer might would wanna know that. If it's unpermitted, they would probably wanna make sure it's safe.
If I'm buying a house and Bubba put a porch on the back with an electrical wire, I would love somebody to look at that and make sure it's not gonna burn my house down.
Yeah, your lender's gonna have all kinds of questions about that.
Yes.
Or if you
lenders
have like
are gonna have-
100 people standing on it, you wanna make sure it holds.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's she brings up a great question about decks, and decks are one of the biggest offenders. My father and I built so many decks at so many houses, just because we could. We didn't even have an instruction manual. So I don't know how well we did them. I was little, but still, nowadays it's a big deal because, like you said, if you have 10 people out there and it falls and you're 2 stories in the air, that's a liability. So decks are a big offense. We want to make sure those are all built with permits. All right, so confidentiality. This one I like, and I like to spend a second here because confidentiality is similar to what we've been talking about in the sense that any information that your client has given you is confidential to you. So you are not allowed to share. Also, confidentiality of offers. So if you are, for example, a listing agent and receive an offer, you cannot share the terms of that offer with anybody else without the express agreement of the original offering party. So for example, and this is one that is a big offense, I see it all the time, it's multiple offers, right? Oh, we got 3 offers on the house, and you call and say, hey, is it too late to get in? No, we got 3 offers, but one of them's cash. If you got cash, come on. What they're trying to tell you is, don't waste your time on the FHA 203K closing 90-day offer because we have a cash going to close in 2 weeks solid deal. What they can't say is that we have a cash closing 2 weeks deal. All they can say is we have other offers. If you would like to make an offer, I have to present it. That's all they can say. Brokers are notorious for saying, oh, we got cash offers. Cash is a term of one of the other offers. Unless the person making the cash offer has given you permission to say, you can tell anybody we're making cash offers, you don't have permission to share that. Confidentiality about your sellers in regards to any, by the way, this is a client confidentiality, right? Client. What does that mean for you to have a client? What do we have to have a client?
Trust.
Well, we have to have trust, but we have to have a written agreement. Well, or at least an agency agreement. So we have to have that agency agreement to create this confidentiality.
So like, going to the question before, the agent that told them was wrong for selling that.
Yeah, they violated their confidentiality. Now, what I'm telling you is confidentiality is based on that fiduciary relationship that's created in the agency agreement. Follow me?
Oh, that was deep.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it gets deeper. Because here's the confidentiality that's created through the fiduciary agreement, that's created through the agency agreement, and without an agency agreement, what do I not have? A fiduciary agreement. What do I not have without a fiduciary agreement? Confidentiality.
So this is be a custom.
So until you sign that contract, you can say whatever you want to.
Well, you're working for the seller still.
You got, well, and this is the purpose of the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. To tell you, here are your options. Don't share anything you don't want me to know until we are working together.
Because until you have that agreement, you use it however you want.
Because if I come to your house
Legally.
and you tell me, hey, we really want 175, but we only owe 150, and we would take that, and then you don't hire me to be your listing agent, and I leave your house, and someone calls and says, Steve, I'm looking for a house by 150,000. Oh, I know one. They're listed at 175, but I get you a good deal because they're my buyer client.
Wow.
And they now get my confidentiality. They get my fiduciary. I owe them everything I know. The seller never hired me.
And you would never tell them that until you have a contract.
Right, I wouldn't be going around like, hey, I got a good deal. But because they hired me, I do owe them everything I know. And the seller never hired me, so I don't owe them anything except for honesty, trust, honesty, and disclosure, which we'll get to in just a minute. Or honesty, disclosure, and company. Yeah. Material facts, disclosure, honesty, fairness, and disclosure. There we go. I'll spit it out. Honesty, fairness, and disclosure. Say again? HFN. Honesty, fairness, and disclosure. So those are the ones of the fiduciaries that we're about to talk about that we owe everybody. All right, so a buyer is willing to pay more than the amount stated in an offer. When must I keep this information confidential?
An agency agreement.
When I have an agency agreement. That's what creates that confidentiality. When must I disclose it?
Yeah,
When I don't. What if I'm, and this is also part of that reason with the Working Real Estate brochure, I'm sitting at the open house, it's my listing, or let me rephrase that, let me give you a little deeper version.
Yeah.
It's listed with my firm.
You're a seller,
I'm a sub-agent of the seller. I'm hoping somebody's gonna come in this house and let me be their buyer's agent. But can I just be their buyer's agent without having dual agency? Right, and that's another reason we're gonna talk about that, because people get confused. They're like, oh, I'll be your buyer's agent. No, I'll be your dual agent.
designated.
It may be designated, but I'll definitely be your dual at a minimum. Because I can't be your buyer's agent solely, right? I either got to be a dual agent or some version of that. So, again, having that conversation and knowing who you work for determines what you can and cannot say. All right, let's talk about accounting. Who loves math? Yeah, oh good. We got like 3 people. Y'all are good at it. So, that's good. There's some math questions. The biggest thing that you're going to run into, where have we seen accounting? Where are you going to run into accounting so far?
Tax rates, calculations.
Tax rates,
conversions.
calculations, interest rates. Most of the time a lender's going to do a lot of these things for us. The biggest accounting is in property management. If you're going to be a property manager, because remember you have a real estate license, you can do property management as well. Your biggest responsibility, the most burden is in property management. Because we're dealing with trust accounts and a lot of invoices. We'll talk about a lot of that in the property management. There's a lot of trust accounts, a lot of billing, a lot of checks. I want to talk about your record retention law real quick. So there's a record retention law in North Carolina that says I have to keep on file all correspondence with any transaction for a period of time from the last action on that file. Okay, follow me so far? So for example, if we closed on a house today, I was your buyer's agent, we closed today, we're closed, we're done. That was the last date of activity on that file. The North Carolina record retention law says I have to keep, anyone take a guess?
25 months.
3 years. Close, close. 3 years. We have a 3-year record retention law. And we'll also talk about trust accounts and property management. But the record retention law is for 3 years. So I have to keep all correspondence, all text message, emails, paperwork, contract, agency agreements, anything that transpired in that deal for 3 years. The biggest thing in regards to that is the trust account. So if I am, and this is where it gets a little hairy, if I am a property manager and you hired me to manage your property, I manage it for a year because I found a tenant and put a year in it. We'll talk about this in property management agreement, but the management agreement for property managers automatically renews. Leases automatically renew with no termination, right? So if these things go on and on and on, my friends,
Perpetually.
how long do I have to keep records? Yeah, it could go on a while.
Wow.
So one of the best practices that we'll talk about in the property management section is I should redo my management agreement from time to time, because then I can put a stop clock on the original paperwork, put that in a file, and start over. So then that gives me some breaks that I don't have to store forever.
So all of your text messages between you and your client, you have to somehow figure out how to get into a reproducible file, either print them or screenshot them and print them or some crazy thing like that?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Are you keeping all yours digital?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's
With the
not,
tri-dunded backup?
it's not kept at the office here, right?
No, we're,
You're at home.
I would say 95% paperless. And honestly, most of the paperwork I have to do is for the school. We have been paperless for many years. I was born of a computer age, so computers are really simple to me, and I just don't understand printing at all. Like the P word is a bad word in my office. I'm like, don't stop it, because most of we have to pay for it. I'm like, stop! You don't need to print. You don't need to print. You don't need to print. You just cost like 2 cents right there. Stop that. So I don't love printing at all. So you're welcome. Yes, look at all the print. You're welcome. That's what I do for you because I love you. But I don't love printing, so we do have most everything backup. And actually, we have. You will find systems as you build your businesses. We have a redundant system. So I have Dropbox that we keep everything in, which is a nice secure place. We also have dotloop that's in a secure Swedish server, but it stays for 7 years there. So we have, as a part of our compliance through our firm, dotloop. Dotloop is available to anybody, but those are good systems that you put it in there and we just throw it in there.
It'd be great when all the counties catch up with recording and notarization so that you can have a fully electronic transaction
Yeah,
all the way through.
true story.
Because y'all are paperless, the rest of the transaction is not.
Yeah, the biggest part that is not paper, or that is still a paper requirement is the deed, the new deed, and sometimes the loan documents are original signatures, and some of them are moving away from that. Yeah.
That just got off subject, but like you said in Yankton County.
Yeah.
Like, you said they destroy their.
They purge their records after 7 years,
But
but
it's just a simple space, because they need the space, they don't have enough space to hold that many records.
I wish I could justify that decision. I have no idea why. For our purposes, real estate purposes, it's mostly because if we get audited, they want to go back and see files, or if there's a complaint. And it's actually pretty relevant we're talking about that portion of it now, because material facts and things that get us in trouble may not always surface the day we're closing. So where we had a 4-bedroom house on a 3-bedroom septic, and later the septic fails and someone's looking to sue, they're coming back after us. So did we have in the file where we told everybody, hey, this is a 3-bedroom septic? I don't know what y'all are thinking. It's a 4-bed. It's a 3-bedroom septic. I told you it's a 3-bedroom septic. So then when they say, Steven, you sold it as a 4-bed. No, see my documents that I had in this folder that I told you 3-bedroom septic. We're cool. So Steven's covered. Our record retention law is 3 years. That does not mean someone wouldn't try to sue you further out.
I was just gonna ask that, does that tie with statutory laws for the time frame or not?
No.
How long do you
No.
keep yours?
I think we keep ours at least 7. Yeah. I honestly probably have almost all of my files. Yeah, very few from when I first started. I guess it's been about 15 years. We had a lot of, it's weird to think about, I'm old. We had paper folders. We had a lot of paper folders. I remember keeping up with paper, and I am horrible at keeping up with paper. It flies in my car. I was a buyer's agent. My car was a disaster. I used to have MLS sheets everywhere. Now it's great. I just pull it up on my computer. It's just so funny to think about. I literally had MLS, like you open the door and MLS papers fall out. And MapQuest directions, because we had that. I know. So now I'm like, yeah, everything's on my phone, my iPad, I can pull it up. So we're very digital now. It's way nicer because, oh man, our folders would be thick, especially at that one buyer that wanted to look at houses forever. So that's accounting. Reasonable skill and care and diligence. Now this was pretty important. Reasonable skill and care. There's actually a general statute that you can be accused of in violation of license law that says you were not acting as a competent real estate broker. You could be found in violation of real estate law and subject to reprimand by the Real Estate Commission and possibly civil action if you are found not being competent. Now, I'm not saying you're an idiot. I'm saying you might be doing something you're not qualified to do without help. You might be, I just got out of pre-license and I decided to embark on a $7.5 million commercial deal. It'd be fun. And no one was helping me. And I was like, I can do this. I went to the grocery store. It was commercial. I got this. Not safe. Or another one, the most common is you have a North Carolina real estate license, right? Where can you sell real estate with your license in North Carolina? All of North Carolina, right? Should I go sell houses in Elizabeth City right now or Topsail Island?
Can you just say within your realtor?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is the MLS access. Because we'll talk about this. How in the world can I help you determine what your house is going to sell for? How in the world can I help you determine what we should offer? How in the world am I going to know what's going on in the marketplace if I don't have access to the MLS data? MLS is our #1 tool as real estate brokers. If I don't have access to that data, I may not have the reasonable skill and care to practice there.
So is that like by the county or is that by the state?
Depends. So like our MLS here is 7 counties. Raleigh kind of has their own. Charlotte has their own. The mountains kind of have their own. There's a couple at the beach. I think we were 41 MLSs total in the state.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot less than it used to be. There used to be almost every county, but we've realized that we can share more data and get more done. There's a lot of reasonings behind it. People don't want.
Yeah, but that's only a couple and a half counties.
It's like
Yeah.
Each.
not even an hour's drive. and you can-
Yeah, Winston-Salem Triad, which is High Point, Greensboro, Winston, Charlotte, and Raleigh are your three big ones. Yeah, and then there's a regional down at the coast, and then even some of the mountain ones have started merging in. Some of them still have local associations, but the MLSs are getting bigger. There's actually probably at some point going to be a statewide MLS. It's just a matter of when everybody gets over themselves. But yeah, it's a big issue. Like, I don't want you coming in my yard, you stay in your yard, like we're building
I
fences.
don't want to show you the property I got over here.
And
I
truthfully,
might sell it to you.
I'm not gonna drive 3 hours to sell a house. It's just not worth my time.
This is
But
a
some
big
people
house.
will. Some people will.
But like, you're allowed like to sell any house that you want, no matter how much it is, no matter where it's at in North Carolina. You have the opportunity to sell.
Legally. The question is, do you have the reasonable skill and care? Yeah. And I'll give you a classic example because I thought I could take care of myself. I was actually, I guess it's been several years ago, back when I was loving going to the beach. I wanted to find somewhere on the coast. We have a lot of coastline. I had no preference as to where. So I was like, Myrtle Beach to Virginia Line. Let's look. So I looked and I was like, oh, we don't have a lot of money, but I want something close to the water. So I was looking for condos, and we found these condos. I'm like, ooh, this is a really good deal. Ooh, this is only $100,000. Ooh, I can see the ocean from a $100,000 condo. I love it.
That should have been your first red flag.
Yeah, I'm like, this is great. There just must not be anybody there. So I go in, I start investigating it, and I drive there. I'm like, ooh, I like the view. This is beautiful. This is a beautiful beach. I can walk out the stairs and be on the beach. The problem, and what I didn't know, because I did not have MLS access, I did not see the disclosures, I didn't even read the local papers. This project is falling in the ocean. It's on the north side of Topsail where the erosion was eating through the island, and the Army Corps of Engineers wasn't putting it back. So the sand was going away, but not coming back. And so these people were, it was essentially trying to dump their condo investments before they sank into the ocean. Retrospect, I probably should have bought because the Army Corps did step in later and help salvage it, but now they have to pay big assessments to keep that sand there. But at one point, the ocean was coming and touching the condos. Like, that's just a little too close. You can get a boat for that. So, but that was me trying to represent. But now imagine if I was doing that for somebody else. What if I would have sold that to one of you? Oh, look at this great condo, you're gonna love it. Yeah. Would the real estate commission said I was operating competently?
Yeah, you've been incompetent for
So
that.
do those assessments really pay for it, or are tax dollars also paying for that?
Both. There's actually a lot of variables that go into that particular beach and I have learned a lot about it. I probably am still not competent, but I have learned a lot about coastal real estate. And part of it has to do with whether you're an engineered beach and the insurances and things that carry it. If it's an engineered beach, you get more federal assistance. And so some of it's county, some of it's local, some of it's for that condo association. So there's a lot of different hands going in that pot.
Because we saw something very similar in Wrightsville Beach, right at the tail end of Wrightsville Beach.
Yep.
And, we sort of resented the fact that all of our tax dollars were going to like keep the condo going, you know?
And I agree with that because there's a lot, and I will also tell you there's a lot of different sides. I've seen it, having been on Oak Island too, a lot of it ends up being property assessments for the city. Where we've had to make assessments to fix. And some of it's a mutual benefit. For example, the Army Corps of Engineers is dredging and they need to make a channel deeper. Well, they've got piles of sand to put somewhere. Great, we'll buy it from you for pennies on the dollar so you can put it back here. So they kind of help work and shake each other's hands a little bit, but there's a lot of politics that go involved. A lot of it goes in there. But just understanding that those politics exist and that you need to be aware. By the way, when I got to Topsail Island where this was going on, you know how I found out about this? I went and sat in a restaurant, and on the front page of the newspaper was the erosion issue on this condo complex. Whoops, should have probably Googled it. Yeah, so this was a big issue. You got to be careful. What if I'd been in the mountains? By the way, they have a lot of different issues in the mountains with slope restrictions and things like that. So there's a lot of things you just have to know reasonable skill and care. So does not matter the value of the property. I have a big saying in real estate, if you are going to service the client, do not look at the price tags. We serve people, not price tags. This is the definition of a fiduciary. You're putting their needs above your own. If you do not want to sell the falling down $6,000 house that you get a contact high from showing, don't take the client. By the way, I've sold those houses. He's probably bought that house. And it's true, and we live in a place where you can do that. I mean, I sold a $12,000 house, cash money, and they were flambéing next door, and we got a lot of interesting showings that day. But he bought it, and I didn't mind it.
The worst ones are when the homeless people break in and they use the toilets that don't work. Those are the worst ones.
It's not homeless people, it's realtors. It's just
In between showings.
yeah, we just don't have anywhere else to go. So, but yeah, it's always an issue, and the reason I always say that is because some people get mad because I don't want to sell that or I don't want to work that client. Just don't. We get the opportunity to work with whom we choose and whom we don't. There are people who do nothing but luxury because they don't want to sell a $200,000 house. There are people that will only do $100,000 or $200,000 houses. They just don't want to do luxury. That's fine. There are people that only do farms. There are only people that do condos. Yeah, I mean, you get to choose where your area of expertise would be, or if you're more of a generalist. Either way, you owe this principle the same because it's the same agency agreement. It's not a price tag. It's not like, oh, you're under $100,000. I'm only going to give you this level of service. It's the same fiduciary requirements. Your liability is still the same. So do you have all the skills necessary to represent a buyer or seller with commercial?
No.
Maybe. Some of you may very well decide to go into commercial. Some of you may have a history in commercial already. Some of you may want to go that route. That's why you're here.
I thought you had to get the CC.
CCIM, you don't have to. You don't have to.
It just makes you credible.
Yeah, it's just credibility. It just gives you, it's like a master's of education. They just pay you a little more and they think you're smarter. It's not a requirement. The only requirement for you to do any of this is the license you will receive from this class. Property management, commercial, residential, land, condos, luxury, whatever you want to sell real estate, you will receive the ability to do so with the license you get in this class. The question is, do you have the reasonable skill and care to do it? And that is a personal decision. Do you have that knowledge, or do you have the ability to get that knowledge? I'm not telling you, hey, I just passed pre-license, I shouldn't sell a house. You can go and probably sell a house. I would also encourage, that's why as provisional brokers too, you got to have a what? Broker in charge. Someone has to be supervising you. So ask that broker in charge, am I doing it right? You're not doing it alone. You've got help. So let's look at number 2. Help buyer looking to build a subdivision and find land. Who am I talking to there? Is that a builder developer? Do you have the skill to help builders and developers?
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe. We did some cool lot math, right? You can do that. I will tell you, when you get in there's a lot of variables based on where you live. How well, some of you may be very well connected in your town. You may be sitting on your planning and zoning. You may be commissioners. We have a realtor in this office. It's the commissioner in Pilot Mountain. She's very connected. She knows a lot of things going on there. She probably would be helpful to developers because she knows where there are available tracts of land. The city's pushing them because they want economic development. Maybe you guys are too. Can we help a buyer or seller with the sale of each property? I think I've pretty well illustrated, unless you know the area, probably not safe.
You can, it's not advised.
Yeah, it's not advised. You can do it legally, it's just not advised. Identify a property for investment and resale.
Yeah.
Some of you in this room are very competent at investments. You know how to do a ROI, you know how to do your cash on cash, you know, very good at estimating repairs. I can tell you this is what I cut my teeth on when I started real estate. I didn't have money to invest, but I sure learned it. I could tell you how much about it would cost to flip a house, how much to get it for, where your margins were. We had a budget, we could plan it out. This was a very big part of my business. Some of you may be doing this already, flipping houses. You have a good competence. Would that make you easy to say, hey, Mr. Investor, I'm maxed out my investments, but hey, let me sell you some stuff. Or I have other opportunities. Let me introduce you to this resource. You can do that. It's be a business model.
It's actually really good to have access to properties too if you have the cash for it, because you can actually sell those for profit to another flipper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're in the market. So like if you buy a $30,000 house and you've got 4 of them, but you can only do 2 at a time, and sell them for 35, you know, and make a little bit for sitting on it for a month.
Absolutely. We had a big saying in the recession, buy low, sell low.
Yeah.
Yep. And you buy it low enough, and you would sell it low enough that either a savvy buyer is getting a good deal, or another investor is going to buy it and hold it and rent it. But I bought it so low that I had enough room for margins. And so yeah, if you could buy low and sell low, it would always sell, right? You would all buy a good property at the right price. That's a good deal. So who does number 2 work for? That's the Austin Powers thing. You may not have seen that. Anyway, the question is, who do you work for versus who do you work with? And that's the question you're going to constantly be asking yourself in respect to what can I do here? What should I do here? And who should I do it for? And that's going to boil down to your agency agreement. And watch with who and for, because you'll see the difference between customer and client, right? Who's my client? Do I have an agency agreement with them?
Yes.
Do I have an agency agreement with my customer? No.
You owe them honesty, fairness,
There it is. Lead in. High five. Yes. Owe them honesty, fairness, and disclosure. These are the third parties, the customers. These are our non-clients. Our clients get the whole old car, right? They get all of our fiduciary duties. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, they get it all. However, everybody, regardless of what our relationship is, will get honesty, fairness, and disclosure. Does that sound like that's too much to ask?
No.
You be honest, fair, and tell people what they should know?
Just integrity.
Yeah, just have some integrity. We're not lying, we're not dubious, we're not sneaky. We aren't, as much as our reputation may precede us, realtors are not bad people. We have to be honest, fairness, and disclose things, material facts. This has to happen for everybody. So then that leads us to what is a material fact?
Something that should be disclosed, or something that you would want your buyer to know, or
Something that's gonna favor judgment.
But you can get
of the
sued for not saying.
What you can get to. Yeah, so material fact is all those things.
Anything important to your buyer.
Anything that's important to your buyer that you should or should have reasonable access to discover. What school is it in? Is that a material fact?
Yes.
It is if your buyer asks you, right? Now, it may not be that you want to tell them because you are not the school board.
You're gonna point them to the Board of Education.
I might give them the resource to answer that, or I might even get the school board to answer it. Say, hey, Mr. School Board, can you send me an email of what school district this is in? I will caution you, be very careful with school districts because they move. We have, actually my sister's in Durham, and she's actually run into this, and she's like, you don't buy on the edge of the school district, because this is where I want my kid to go, but they move the district so many times, you may end up in another school, and you may flip-flop within the same 4-year term at the same high school. Yeah,
Sorry, I'm from Michigan, so
Yeah.
when I went through, we had school of choice. Is that something you ever remember?
great question.
Yes.
So he was talking about the school of choice. Some places do, some places don't. That's on a county by county. Forsyth County does have a school of choice, which means you're in a zone and you can choose from these 3 or 4 elementaries, these 3 or 4 middles.
Subject to
Availability and capacity.
transportation.
But then, like, if you're example,
All those
if you're in
things.
Davie County, you're going to one high school because they only got one. So high school they got, so you don't have a choice.
Choose any school you want as long as it's out.
Exactly. Any school you want, as long as it's Davie High. And so there are things like that, and that's another thing that, again, having that reasonable skill and care, that's a fun backstory to share, folks, about how the one high school in an entire county worked out. But material facts or anything like that, an important fact that may affect a person's judgment in making a decision on purpose buying the house. So school systems, the ground's contaminated, and anything that is important to your folks.
So obviously any encumbrances.
Any encumbrances that you're aware of, right? And that's where I'm really kind of leading this conversation, is once we know what material facts are, now we got to draw a line and say how many of those should you know versus how many of those would be discovered by a professional. And which of those are you required to discover and disclose, and which of those are you maybe not expected to necessarily see or readily discover. So material facts come in a lot of flavors. We're going to talk about patent versus latent versus patent defects when you return from your last break, because that's a great place to take one.
Oh man, we just getting fun. Let's just stand up.